The first question that I want to tackle is my child going to have in-person instruction this year? All right. So I'll give you the quick question. Yes, Whitmore Lake Public Schools is planning to put forth a plan that will have in-person instruction 5 days a week. Currently, we're in phase 4, and phase 4 allows for that. There are multiple requirements that have to happen in order for us to do this. And that's what my team's been working on for the last 2 weeks, trying to figure out a logistical plan to make that happen. There's a lot of questions about online schooling. Yes, there are going to be some online options, but right now, essentially, you're going to have to choose as a parent between in-person instruction in phase 4, 5, and 6. If you want to do an online option, we have some available right now, but we are working on a one specific to Whitmore Lake Public Schools. That's the first big rollout. Now, there's a lot of nuances to that, and I'm going to get into as many of them as I can. The first one is, and I'll break this down between grade levels a little bit. The first one is, if we're currently in phase 4 and we're having in-person instruction, will the kids be required to wear masks? So the answer to this question at the K through 6 level is a little different than the middle school and high school. In grades K through 4, we are putting forth a plan for 5-day-a-week in-person instruction that basically brings kids off of a bus or from their parents' car into the building, and they go right to the classroom. And there's not going to be movement between cohorts. You're going to kind of stay with your class all day. And in doing so, we don't have to require students in grades K through 4 to wear masks. Okay, it won't be a requirement. There will be some issues maybe relative to some health concerns that we might recommend it, but it's not a requirement. So that's our goal in those grades. As a teacher, as an employee, you will be required to wear a mask. So if your if your students in a first grade classroom, be prepared to stay there with that group of kids as much as possible all day long, and have a teacher who is wearing a mask and possibly a face shield. Questions about grades 5 and 6. So the executive order says in phase 4 for operating schools that students in grades 6 through 12 will have to wear masks, but our 5th and 6th grade work together. So our 5th and 6th grade students will be wearing masks under our phase 4 plan as well. There will be minimal back and forth between those groups. Maybe 1 or 2 class changes a day, but not 5 and 6. But even if we're doing a little bit, the requirement is that we have to wear the mask. So if you have a 5th grade student in our plan right now, plan on wearing a mask. A question I get often in association with those statements I just made are, will masks be provided for us? Yeah, we are working on a plan where everyone has kind of a cool Whitmore Lake type mask that we expect them to wear proudly in those grades. In middle school and high school, grades 7, 8, and 9 through 12, all those students in phase 4 will be required to wear masks. So in our plan, that's what we're going for. We cannot at the high school level get a schedule down where kids just don't move from cohort to cohort. We are trying to mitigate the amount of movement they have, but right now there's just no way that we can put together a plan with in-person instruction where they're not moving from class to class. 7th and 8th grade, we do have a plan where we can kind of keep them in one hallway, and movement will be very minimal. So it's almost like you're going to see and we do that a little bit already, but not to this extent. So you're going to see a plan where they're kind of restricted to one one wing and one hallway, but they still have to wear masks. Are visors or shields allowed? I was just going to say that actually to Rachel's question. So face shields, like a plastic see-through shield, is right now the health department and the state's telling us that that doesn't count as a facial covering. That just a face mask or a sock, kind of a neck sock that you pull up, does count as a face covering. The shield doesn't cover your complete mouth. That's kind of a bummer for us because many of our teachers, I think, were looking forward to using those. And we're still waiting on some more defined legal opinions on it. It's something that could evolve because it's very popular. We see them in grocery stores. We see them all over the place. And we like them because you can see eyes real easily and you can see the mouth real easy. And those are key components when you're trying to teach people and communicate with them. But right now, as it stands, the face shield, the clear plastic shield alone doesn't count. All right. I'm going to let a few more people in. I'm sorry, I'm doing this kind of. All right. All right. So again, at the upper elementary, grades 5 through 6, in grades 7 and 8, and grades 9 through 10, we are planning on opening on August 31st for in-person instruction with face mask restrictions. Okay. We are trying, and I think we have a pretty good plan to minimize the amount of movement that happens throughout the day. That's a key component of the plan as well. So classes, especially at the lower elementary, don't intermix hardly at all. All right. Let's jump into transportation because that's how our day starts.
Okay, this is
So,
okay.
So we are expecting, again, if you can mute your microphones, please. We are expecting kids to ride buses this year. There is no requirement that restricts busing for us other than any student who is riding a bus has to go through a hand sanitizing session before they get on the bus, and they have to wear face masks while on the bus. So again, we would like to give each student of ours who's riding a bus a face mask so they can have their very own to keep with them. If a student comes to a bus stop and something has happened to that mask, we are prepared to give face masks out, disposable masks, but we'd like to minimize that. We'd like kids to be responsible for wearing their masks. While they're on the bus, again, this isn't a requirement, but we do think it's important that we get our volume down so we don't, ideally, we don't go past 2 kids per seat. We'd like family members to sit together, and we're considering even having assigned seats. But that is still in the works. Right now, the only requirement is face masks and hand sanitizer. Once the school buses get to school, and this is another part of our plan that we think is important, delaying our routes a little bit so kids aren't getting to school so early is important to us. Our goal is to get a bus to a school full of kids and get those students off of the bus and into their classrooms as soon as possible. So allowing for students to get off the bus and then to congregate together, while it being very natural for our students to do, is something that we don't think is appropriate and part of the plan. So we're trying to encourage a plan that gets kids off the bus and into their classrooms as soon as possible. A couple of quick follow-ups. And I was going to get into the positive testing of students, but in a little bit. Let me jump to the next one. It says, can you opt out of a bus until we move into our higher phase, then opt back into the bus? Yes, you can. Julie asked that question. It's a good question. So there's really no requirements. It would be, I think, easier for us if we knew more precisely how many people were riding our buses. So we are putting out a survey in the near future to really try to lock that in. Are you a 5-day-a-week rider? Are you a 1-day-a-week rider? If we knew exactly who was going to be on the buses, we could put forth a really good plan and the safest plan. We know that's not always possible because life changes all of a sudden, and some days you're planning on driving and then you're not. You're putting them on a bus. But as much as we can know about that, the better. Again, I'll jump into the question about what happens on a positive case in a little bit. Right now, it's important to understand that we are building class schedules, a daily schedule that might get you to school a little bit closer to the start time, but we are planning on releasing your sons and daughters very close to the time they're normally released. So we're building a plan to start the school year where we're keeping them in school all day, 5 days a week. What might change a little bit is when they're dropped off. And that is to ensure that when kids get off the bus or when they come into the school from a parent drop-off zone, they're going immediately to their classes, and we're just minimizing congregation points throughout schools. We've covered face masks a lot. I would say it's important to understand that there are disclaimers when it comes to face masks. The most notable disclaimer in the back to school plan is that if for some reason medically you can't wear it, there can be an exemption to this. We're going to be asking right before we start school at our registrations who might qualify for this. It's very important that people take this seriously, and we don't want people just making up things. That's probably not going to happen, but people have shared all kinds of crazy stories with me. We just want people to be responsible. If there's a legitimate medical reason, we want to know. Asthma, any kind of cardiopulmonary issues with breathing, a mask can get in the way with that. Yesterday at a staff meeting, we did go through the idea of actually taking breaks. So a lot of teachers are saying to me, like, it's just, we have to wear that. You have to make a kid wear this like for 6.5, 7 hours. That's really hard. If they have to ride a bus and get an early run, and they have to wear it on the bus, that can really, now we're talking 7+ hours. And the only break that's defined is at lunch. However, I have been working with our health department, and I will tell you that the idea of taking a break periodically within a classroom is fully expected. It just has to be rolled out in a way that we're being responsible with it. So the idea that a teacher could step back and take a mask off and breathe, and that teacher should allow students to do that as well. It's extremely important that we share that with our families and our kids, because that's going to be the reality of a classroom in this phase. Will there, a couple of things. Will there be kids club? Are masks required at recess? Kids club has some additional requirements, so I'm not going to get into all those right now, because they're quite extensive, and honestly, some of them don't make sense to me with how they fit with like why are we treating a 5th grader this way and a 3-year-old this way? So I'm still getting some feedback from health department and state officials on that. So I'm not going to comment on kids club right now, Julie. Are masks required at recess? It depends on your age group, but again, recess is big for students, little kids, right? So after 4th grade, it's not as big a deal, but the answer is in the plan that we're providing for K4, no, you don't have to wear them at recess. And really, anytime we bring a group of kids outside, we're expecting that kids can take more frequent breaks from the masks. We certainly don't want them running around in strenuous exercise with the mask. So PE, any outdoor activity, breaks are planned where masks can be brought down so kids can breathe easier. and I do expect, and this is an area that I feel like I'm going to be saying this a lot, but this plan got rolled out on June 30th. We've had multiple follow-up meetings. When I say we, I mean school administrators. We've had legal briefs. We've had superintendent meetings galore. These things are evolving, and we're expecting some more information on that, because extracurricular activities, physical activities, recess activities, they kind of go along with removing the mask, and the mask was allowed for removal only during eating. So, but the only kind of break that I've heard so far is that or the only caveat to alleviating those requirements is that you can take breaks in the classroom. All right, what happens if a student gets sick at school? What happens if a teacher gets sick at school? They're two different things, but the only requirement that is different than any other kind of sickness that might happen at school, the only requirement is that we work with our health department. All right, so if one student in third grade gets sick and the symptoms look like COVID-19, we are going to be working with our health department. There will be a test. But one student getting sick in third grade does not mean that we have to close the entire third grade, that we have to close the entire school. So the health department is, the reason why there's a requirement that we work with them is they're going to come in and immediately do contact tracing. And if we can ensure to the best of our ability that that cohort of students stayed together. They got on the bus, this is what it looked like. They got off the bus, this is what it looked like. In the classroom, this is what it looked like. If we can ensure that cohort is staying together throughout the day, their contact tracing goes really fast, and the likelihood that a major disruption of our schooling would happen would be very small. All right, so it's a misnomer to say one positive case shuts a school down. But the health department hasn't given us a definition for all of that. All right, they're just saying it's case by case, and it's zip code by zip code, it's county by county. Their only requirement is that we work with them. What happens if a teacher exhibits symptoms? We go through the same protocol. We do have some areas in each building where we can quarantine students and staff, so we kind of get them out of the mix as soon as possible, and get them tested as soon as possible. We don't have a requirement that we test right away. That's not something we're going to do at our school. What happens if a student tests positive? Will we know who tested positive? So yes, school officials will know, health department will certainly let us know, and we will tell the community if we have positive cases. We're not going to tell you the names, but we will let you know what's going on in that regard. Will there be temperature checks? No, not at this time. It's not a requirement, and we're getting some mixed messages even from the health department if that's a good idea to do. But no, right now in phase 4, we're not planning any temperature checks. I will add that I haven't talked much about phase 3. I'll just make a comment on it if you're not familiar with phase 3. Phase 3 is 1, 2, and 3 are the really restrictive phases. Currently, we're in phase 4. If we go back into phase 3, everything I'm talking about is null and void because we have to close buildings and go into a remote learning mode. A good segue from what I just talked about relative to if a student or a staff member gets sick is cleaning. So let me try to characterize what a classroom is going to look like. In K through 4, a classroom is going to look very much like getting off the bus, getting to your class as soon as possible, and staying with that cohort of students throughout much of the day. Yeah, even if you're taking a class recess break, you're staying with your class. We're not going to let an entire school population jump on the playground at once or on the on the play units at once. we'll probably have to separate them even at recess as much as we can. Even eating in the classroom is a likelihood that we're dealing with right now. So our in-person instruction keeps everyone together. If you're in grades 5 through 12, expect some movement. 5th and 6th grade, you're going to move once or twice a day. So you're going to be wearing a face mask. Once you get into 7th and 8th grade, expect to move 5 up to 6 times a day. But we're trying to control that and get that down to 3 and 4, and we're keeping it to just a few classrooms at the high school. High school schedules are really built to move around from specialized classroom to specialized classroom. So expect a lot of movement at the high school level. And again, expect masks. As far as eating at the middle school and high school, we're still working on that. There's a likelihood that students will be restricted to where they can eat. Classrooms could be used. Cafeterias have to be kept at a very small level. So that plan is still being worked on. So that's kind of how a day would work. Right now, you would even have opportunities for extracurricular activities, and we're still working on those plans, but we can do it. So we are trying to put together a plan that allows for it. So where does it start to look different? It's cleaning. It's really, if you're changing classrooms a lot, we have to clean the rooms a lot. So the requirement is that if you leave a classroom and another group comes in, we have to clean in between. And to do that, you have to wear personal protective equipment. So we are working on plans for, to equip every classroom with some of that, those materials. We are also purchasing heavy duty cleaners that basically they're electrostatic sanitizers rather. They go in and you spray a room with an electrostatic mist, and it quickly sticks to every surface. And these are the types of things they use on airplanes. They're expensive, but it allows us, if we're staying in a room for more than 4 hours, it eases the burden on the teacher to have to clean the room, and it allows us to not have to hire 25 custodians. One custodian will just have to work during the day in each building and just kind of clean a section at a time. But it doesn't take more than a few minutes to sanitize a room with these devices. So if you're at a younger level, you might see a custodian coming in throughout the day. You might have to take a break from a classroom. Probably it'll happen at recess. You'll come back, your room is sanitized. It won't look and feel much different, other than your teacher will be, of course, wearing a mask. If you're at the high school, you'll be asked to periodically clean down your workstations with what we're calling household cleaners. You'll have to wear your protection gear on your face and such, but it'll be really, some of our teachers have already done that, our particularly neat teachers. So it's not a huge stretch. It just has to be routine, and we have to inspect it. I'm going to tackle a couple of questions in the chat box here. One of them is, what are additional cleaning procedures that are in place? So, I can go through all the requirements, but it's essentially this. We're minimizing the amount of materials that we share. If any shared materials get exchanged between students, the expectation is that we're cleaning those regularly. If you're in a classroom for more than 4 hours, that all the hard surfaces have to be cleaned. That's where that electrostatic cleaner would come in. If you're changing classes, going from first hour to second hour, there's a new group of kids that comes in. Before you leave, we're going to have desks and surfaces wiped down and any shared materials wiped down. And we are going to ask students to participate in that. To ask a teacher to do all that would add several minutes to each classroom day. If a child has to be quarantined because of a known contact with someone who tested positive, what is the learning plan, online, physical work? So if someone tells you you can't come to school, and that happens all the time throughout the year. So if a medical person tells you that, professional tells you that, if a legal person tells you that, a judge or something says you can't go back, we do have obligations to continue the education. So that's different. That question is different than, can I pick an online option? Because if you want to go online, if you know you just don't want to put your son or daughter in one of our buildings this year, we will have an option for you, but it's a commitment you're going to have to make. It's not a fluid come back and forth. But if it's temporary, that's a different situation. So we are installing in every single classroom, all of our learning spaces are going to have, they're called interactive panels essentially, and we're outfitting those with cameras and things. So if if your son or daughter has to be home, then you can follow along in what I call a synchronous instruction. You're following on in sync with the instructor. And of course, we'd have to make some modifications to some of the classes that your son or daughter has. But we don't, right now, we don't have an online package that syncs up exactly with what happens in the classroom. So these temporary departures are best managed through remote access to our classroom with synchronous instruction. That's a lot of education speak. Please, if you don't understand it, follow up with a question in the chat box. Here's another question. Will there be a remote option that allows parents to bring their children to school when and if we move to phase 5 or 6? So, so if we're in phase 5 and 6, many of the restrictions, and 6, we're business as usual. In 5, many of the restrictions I'm talking about with face coverings and cleaning start to go away. So we're getting very close to business as usual. So my remote learning options, I think, start to decrease as you move towards 5, from 4 to 5. But still, I think there'll be, like I just spoke to, there will be remote access that we're going to have to engage in if someone just can't be here. And I emphasize can't versus want. If you can't be here, we're going to try to take care of you as if you want to be in the classroom. If you want to be away from the classroom, that's a different package that we want to roll out in the coming weeks. We have some options right now, but they're contracted. And so I can't speak to the integrity of the curriculum in the manner that I'm comfortable. And so I'm asking our parents to hold off and wait for a Whitmore Lake package that I can ensure is more closely aligned with what we do and it's not contracted out. Would it be possible to rotate teachers instead of kids? It's just a thought. It's a very good thought. And in fact, that's how we're working in grades K through 4 and in 5 and 6. 5 and 6 involves a little bit of movement because you do have some specialty teachers like your math specialty, your English language specialty, but we are adjusting the schedule. So you might be, one day you might be going heavy on math and science. The next day might be social studies and English, and then your elective teachers come in. If possible, that's the best way to do it. It minimizes movement. If we have to get into a contact tracing situation, I think it's very responsible, and it's how we work well with our health department, because those people are going to be working very quickly, and to allow them to do their due diligence, giving them a list of people that have potentially been exposed, and minimizing it, keeping it small is it's just the responsible way to go about business right now. So yes, it's just a thought, but it's a very good thought. So, and one that we are working on diligently. The next question is, will after-school activities that have previously used buildings be able to happen this year? It's up in the air. Athletics is everyone's waiting for the MHSAA to say, and this is grades 7 through 12. Some 6th graders are allowed to participate. Right now, they're saying, outdoor sports are a go. Indoor sports, expect right now maybe pushing it later back into September. But right now we're planning on it. We're operating as if it can happen. Extracurriculars, and let's throw everything from band, which happens outside of school, marching band as well as in school. We're still evaluating. There's this notion that if you're outside, it seems to be okay, and that there's more of an allowance for it. So any activity that might use a building, if we can put outside, we're more comfortable allowing it to happen. Any indoor activity that is going to exceed a large number just can't happen. I mean, they're allowing for up to 50 right now, but we're trying to minimize that because, again, we want to be respectful and responsible with our contact tracing. Another question, if a child were to need to be quarantined for 14 days, would there be remote synchronous learning options? Yes, I did answer that question earlier. It's always worth repeating though. Um, Starting the school year with us, I mean, I will tell you, I wouldn't be promoting this plan so diligently if I didn't think that this was the best option for our kids. The best advice that we've been given, that I think we've been given so far, is that really Michigan should prepare, Southeast Michigan should prepare for starting and stopping periodically. Um, what happened in the spring is that we started to roll out some remote learning options, but we had a lot of capacity that we just couldn't reach with our staff. We had people who couldn't, didn't have devices at home. So we had a lot of work we had to do before we could even get to learning. What we want to do is start the school year, build capacity with our teachers, make sure the students and the teachers and the parents understand how all these tools are going to be used. And then if we have to go into a remote, if we regress to phase 3, or if we get a lot of cases in the region and the health department says phase 4 or not, the best thing to do would be to close for a while, just take a couple weeks off. We're not going to miss a beat. The idea that we had to wait weeks just to roll out a learning package, it was painful. None of us want to go through that. Our teachers didn't like it. I didn't like it. Our parents were struggling at home without proper assistance. So I keep saying, let's give kids in school, give us 2 or 3 weeks to build this capacity. If we have to close, Whitmore Lake Public Schools doesn't miss a beat, but it could be in a remote learning situation. And, we could be saying to our teachers, come on in and put a plan out. All the kids have devices now. Let's manage a synchronous instruction so you can see the teacher operating in a certain way. It could be, even that we reduce the amount of kids that come on a certain day. Those are called hybrid plans. And we're expecting that that's a possibility. But we think it's really important that you start the year with us, gain that capacity. And then if we have to go to something like that, we're not missing a beat. We don't have a lot of downtime. I hope I answered that question correctly. I have a lot to say, and I'm sorry if I'm talking too much. So if I'm understanding, that's good. We got to clarify. I love clarifying. If I'm understanding this correctly, that if there's a worry of exposure to you during an in-person instruction, you will be able to access an online package. If a medical professional tells your son or daughter that you can't come to our school, we are going to make sure that you're getting schooling. If you want to be here, but you can't be here because a medical professional told you can't be here, then yeah, we're going to you'll have a device and you will have access to the classroom. It's going to look differently than it did in the spring. It's going to be a lot more synchronous, in sync with what we're doing in the classroom. But yeah, that's fair. I think that's the right thing to do for the kids in this community. If you are nervous as a parent and don't want to send your kid into the classroom, then that's a different situation. We want to have an option for you. Right now, our only option is some contracted curricula, and we are trying to roll out one that's more closely aligned to what we do in Whitmore Lake. When will the online package be expected? It's a fair question, and to be fair to you, I'm not going to give you an answer that I'm making up. I'm going to tell you that it's something that we're working on daily. Most schools in the county are in the same position as Whitmore Lake. So 3 times a week we get together and we try to hone the ideas of what we're trying to do a little bit more and more. Many schools are aiming at early August. I think that's a fair rollout for Whitmore Lake too. So just to try to answer your question without locking me into something I can't do, I'll say first or second week of August right now. I'm, uh, I'm going to keep going through some of the frequently asked questions, and hopefully it'll generate a few more. Um, and then if we run out of questions, um, I will just tell you that I'm I do appreciate your feedback on this, because what I think the next steps for Whitmer Lake are right now with what we know is that we publish these frequently asked questions, and because some of the answers do evolve, but we give you a chance to see them in writing, and it will, your responses, your interaction will guide some of this. I mean, we have to put together a plan that the board's going to accept and approve. um, and I know they want 5-day week instruction, but they also want to ensure that it's safe and everyone feels safe, including the employees. So um, uh, feel free to, and, your feedback has been great so far. Um, Special populations. These are students with IEPs. Will the school work with students with IEPs? Will anything special be done with those students? So, yeah, we are, what we do in Whitmore Lake is really unique at times, because we really try to integrate all of our students into the classroom. We don't want anyone to feel like they're different in any way. So, um, but some of our special needs students are special needs students because of extreme health concerns. And so, yes, we are working with them individually. Um, those are some of the busing options I really didn't talk about, but I mean, um, at times we take some of our special needs students, and we might bus them with other kids just to avoid long, we might have to staff those buses with more people and more cleaning gear. So we might change routes a little bit to accommodate that. But um, we'll try to integrate as much as possible. But certainly, if there's a student who's vulnerable, um, we're going to work with them on unique remote learning options, just to make sure their safety is. In other words, they're not going to be required to come to school. There's a question: what if a family member has a medical issue, and the risk of bringing home COVID is scary? So, first of all, I empathize with this. This has been, most of the research that we get is that really kids don't get sick in the same capacity that older people are getting sick. Um, and there seems to be a lower vector rate. So if a kid's ability to spread it seems lower, but that it's anecdotal, and the house studies that come out aren't, I mean, they're really not, like, they're taking lots of information from around the globe, and they're trying to give you an answer. But they're very clear when the health department says, this is what we think, but we don't have it definitively. We can't guarantee that a kid's not going to transmit this to an elderly person. So so to answer your question, everyone's situation is unique. And this COVID thing, there are no guarantees with it, are there? I mean, it's changed a lot since it started. And I would just say, if you're in a position where you feel like exposing uh, your son or daughter to a classroom and then coming home is going to put your family at risk, that could be a unique situation. You might want to consider a remote option. If you're able to, if it fits in the wheelhouse of your family, if you're able to, just try it and see how it feels, how the plans of the school, how we coordinate kids, and it depends on what level your sons or daughter are at. But if you're able to, I would ask you to just try it. And if you feel you have to step away, I mean, you can step into a remote learning environment, um, relatively quickly. They have makeup plans, and certainly, every situation is different. That's why it's hard to say we're going to craft a plan for everyone. That's impossible. Everyone's going to have a different set. But if you don't feel comfortable, we want to have an option for you. And if you just feel like going there is too scary of a thought, then I would wait for a remote option. I would also say fear is a huge driver right now, and it's. I like to say I'm waiting for facts to come out, but like I said before, a lot of the information we get is anecdotal. It's from the health department. It's of a nature that I would suggest to you that I won't even be offering in-person instruction if the anecdotal evidence the health department's giving us says stay closed. Certainly, it's always safest to stay in your own home and never leave because you don't get exposed to anything. But that's not what's best for kids in every case, and that's not it's not what the health department's saying either. They're saying if you can open with these requirements, it should be safe. But if you've got a unique situation, by all means, we call that the mom factor, and the mom factor is well respected in this district. A couple of questions have come in. So I mentioned that kids are going to get to go out for recess, and they have to stay with their cohort and group, and that they could use playground equipment. So the only requirement we have with playground equipment is that it's cleaned routinely. So, what exactly does that mean? They never defined it for us. So I love our playground because we worked really hard on it. And when I was a kid, I love the playground. So I want to make it available. Cleaning it thoroughly is a challenge for us right now. We want to see if our electrostatic cleaners work on it. They're not really made to be used outside. So if there's a lot of wind and we can't ensure that it's working, we wouldn't open it to our students. If it's a nice calm day, it would probably work just fine, and we could clean the whole thing between class breaks. So it's up in the air, but we're going to err on the side of caution. If you can't use the playground because environmental concerns dictate it, then we still want kids outside. We want them walking around, getting some exercise, taking a break from their masks, spacing out a little bit more. That's a healthy thing to do. I hope I answered that question. If I didn't, someone tell me. This is another one. It's okay to keep asking this. I've answered it a few times, but is there a remote option through Whitmer Lake Schools or other online schools? Right now, Whitmer Lake, all of our online options have been contracted. So it depends on what level you're at. We're very comfortable using things like Michigan Virtual University. They're robust, rigorous curricula that we roll out to our own kids throughout the day. We've had kids take Latin with us, advanced statistics and things like that, environmental classes that we don't always fit into our routine of class offerings at the high school. It's a very rigorous and a very a program with a lot of integrity. We have other programs that we've contracted with that we use just for, maybe like long-term disability or sickness, and we've used those in grades 7 through 12. And then we have another option that we call VLAC, which is a complete contracted curriculum. We don't see the kids. Some of our kids in Whitmer Lake use that. It's kind of been the bastion of maybe homeschool parents who want to stay connected with the school but don't want to send their kids to school. And I really just can't speak to it. It's not something that I've investigated a lot and I haven't put a lot of time into, but I've started to. I think the best option if you really want remote is just to wait for us to roll out our plan. It's something we're looking forward to doing in the next 3 weeks. I've heard some special ed service like social work being offered to IEP students virtually while the student is in school. IEP kids interact with many extra personnel. How do we limit contact? Yes. So our goal is to keep students from leaving their cohort and going from space to space with other kids. If you're just interacting with one staff member, that's okay. But if we have to do any kind of grouping, we want to use, if that's the way it has to be, we want to minimize that as much as possible. And if it has to happen outside of a school day, so be it. Good question, though. Am I allowed to visit school? So yes, but expect, some parents want to go into classrooms. We have to minimize all that. We have to stop it during phase 4, especially. You certainly, if you're a parent and you need to get access to your son or daughter, we're not going to barricade the doors. We're going to let you in. We're probably just going to make you wait, and you'll have to do some screening with us. You'll have to answer questions about, have you been sick? Where have you been? And you might have to have your temperature taken. Can I volunteer? We're still evaluating that. We have people to do a lot of work and help with us with things, but again, because of contact tracing, we have to make sure that anyone who interacts with our kids, we have as much information and access to their health records and systems as possible. So, while I don't know that that's going to happen much in phase 4. How do I get communication daily as things change and develop? So I know people are craving information daily. I don't know that I can get that to you. But I do think one of the reasons why I wanted to have this Zoom meeting is really to use you as a tool to expand upon what I think are a list of frequently asked questions, and then put those questions on our website. So I think the answer to that question is, how do I get communication daily? We're going to put these on our webpage, and then you can check, and we'll update them as often as possible. Right now, we've committed to weekly updates, either through email or through these Zoom meetings. And we expect as school gets closer and closer that you're going to get more information from buildings and not just the district level. You'll start hearing about transportation. It'll almost be daily, but that's not going to happen until we get right up close to school. Here's a question. Can we still send K-4 students to school with a mask if we choose? Yes, of course. I would add that it's recommended that anytime you put a human being into a room with other people, that you wear a mask. If you take your sons and daughters with you to the grocery store, you are probably seeing a sign that says you have to have a mask on. So my kids have come with me places, they all have masks. And certainly, yes, if you want to do that, that's your choice. And I think it's a good choice, by the way. Is PBS going to continue? Yeah, in some way, shape, or form. The problem with PBIS, I think you mean, is we can't have assemblies in phase 4. So bringing everyone together into the gym and showing them, like Mr. Peace or whatever. I'm sorry, I didn't forget his name, but that's not allowed to happen in phase 4. But it doesn't mean we can't, reward kids for behavior and the types of soft skills that we think are important, and the social emotional behaviors that we think are important to having a healthy environment, healthy school environment. If a student refuses to wear a mask when required on the bus or during school, has there been a discussion on how the schools will decide consequences? Yes, it will be blended into our code of conduct. It'll probably be put out as a special addendum to the code of conduct, because I don't know that this is going to be something we have to do forever. But it comes down to this. If you have a mask that a son or daughter that can't wear a mask because of a medical reason, we are going to let our staff know, and we're going to be careful about how we let other kids know that individual student cannot wear a mask if it's a medical reason. If you just choose not to, if your parent says, and I hope this doesn't happen, but if a parent tells a student not to wear a mask, I mean, we're putting a kid in a really bad position. But ultimately, at the end of the day, I mean, we're going to work with people and try to educate them, and I think we're going to win those battles like we often do. They go on every year in different forms, but this one, of course, has been politicized, and everyone's given their own take on it. All I know is there's a requirement, and I want to have school, and this is a requirement, and you're going to wear a mask. And if you ultimately refuse not to, then you're picking a remote option in my book. But I want to tell my teachers when they come back to school that I've taken every precaution to make sure they're safe. They should feel safe in the classroom. And if a kid's coming in not wearing a mask and they don't feel safe, then I haven't done my job. So, and same on the bus. Willing to work with kids. If they forget it, we'll give them one. If they refuse, we'll probably tell them, you have to take a break from the bus. But as long as you're willing to work with us, you're welcome back on the bus. When will returning high schoolers get their schedules? so we've got, they're really close to being ready. But I will tell you that we are modifying schedules even as I speak to try to minimize movement throughout the building. So our registration day is desperately looking for a calendar. 24, 25, 26, something like that. So the Monday and Tuesday of, we come back on August 31st, that Monday. So our registration is that Monday and Tuesday before we go back to school, and that's when schedules will be officially be ready. Are face shields allowed instead of face masks? So I'm going to answer this in two parts. If you're a staff member, if you're a student, no, the requirement is that you wear a face covering, a mask, surgical mask, a neck sock that you bring up over your, and then you can wear a face shield in addition to. If you have a medical reason where you can't wear a mask that covers your mouth, I do think that might be an exception. And that would be a good way really of handling any kind of asthma situation where your son or daughter can't breathe through a mask very comfortably. There are some vented ones with charcoal filters that work well. But if none of that works and you want your kid in the school setting and you want to show that there's a good faith effort to try to protect, a shield is appropriate in that situation for a medically fragile kid. Just to clarify, students need a medical reason to participate in WL online option. So to clarify, if you choose to go online, no. If you want to be in our school, but a medical professional has said you can't be in our school for typically it's 14 days. So you're looking at 3 weeks where you want to send your son or daughter to school, but a medical professional has said, don't do it. That's where we want to get into what I call remote synchronous instruction. All right, so I think the way you phrase the question is wrong. I think, but it's a hard idea to roll out if you've never dealt with it. So there's online schooling. You'll have to pick that if you want it. We want to give you an option, a Whitmore Lake option. Right now, we do have some other options, but we want to prepare a Whitmore Lake virtual option for you. And that's if you want it. And if certainly if someone says to you, like a medical professional says, don't go, you've got a home environment that's too fragile, your son or daughter's too fragile, that remote option, but it's going to be a semester-long decision. If there's periodic breaks that you have to take, that's called a hybrid situation. That's a little bit different. We want to retain you and get you back in the classroom as soon as possible, or when the medical professional says it's okay. If that's, if you've got a specific situation and you really want to know more information about that, email me. Either I'll get back to you or I'll have someone of my staff members explain this to you better than I can do on a Zoom call. We are new to the district, and going into 9th grade will be an opportunity to tour to familiarize my daughter with the building. Yes, those are called new student orientations and back to school nights and parent nights. And they are traditionally, we've done those early. It's a good question. And does the back to school plan allow for us to bring a bunch of people into our school during a non-school event? No. So we are trying to figure out a way to bring students in who have never been to our school just in smaller groups. But we haven't released that yet. But as the closer we get to August 31st, you'll start getting information on that. But that is a really important new student orientation, especially at the secondary level with class changes. I know promotes a lot of anxiety. So right now we still have open house and things like that. It's on our calendar, but how to pull it off with the requirements, we haven't got to it yet because we're still sorting out the details of instruction, which is really our #1 mission, safe instruction. I read Ann Arbor's Teachers Union letter to the public. Have you heard similar from WLPS Teachers Union? Yes, I would say yes. our teachers are just like me, just like our school board, just like our parents and our kids. They're craving to get every answer you can get. Some of the answers we just can't give right now. But yes, we are planning on meeting with our teachers this week to share as much as we can and to answer their questions. But you know, uh, I would just say Whitmore Lake is different than Ann Arbor. And I don't mean that in a pejorative way. Um, I work very well with our teachers, and I'm committed to putting them. If I bring them back, I'm bringing myself back. It's going to be safe and sound. But yeah, I do speak with union leaders about this very same thing. Some of the concerns that teachers had in Ann Arbor were very legitimate. Well, thank you. We're working hard. To clarify, yes, Jen, maybe I'm not being clear about it. Jen's one of our teachers. There are 2 Whitmore Lake options. Right now, when I say there's an option available to everyone, it is contracted curriculum. That means we pay somebody to deliver an option to your son or daughter, and it doesn't always sync up with what's going on in the classroom. But if you just don't want to come into a classroom and you're willing to say, okay, that's the way it's going to be for months, plan on that commitment. It's just a big commitment. And as a parent, as an educator in this community, I don't want to force you into making a commitment that you're not comfortable with. I think most people, when they ask me about this online option stuff, they want it to be temporary. An online option really isn't built to be temporary. Um, you know, but I'm also aware of the fact that Whitmore Lake Public Schools might have to go into a periodic closure where we do go what I call remote. This is what we're going to do. You do it at home, but we're planning on coming back, and that staying in sync with the classroom is really important, and it's almost impossible to do that if you go to a contracted remote learning or virtual option. So I just want to be honest with you. It's again, if you've got a real particular specific concern, I can certainly give you my opinions in more detail on it. But for the purpose of this call, I'm really just trying to spell out like there's differences. And thanks, Jen, for adding to it. What is being shared on Facebook? I don't even read Facebook, to be honest with you. So I don't know. I can't answer that. It's too much information. But certainly if there's a group of parents, I'm going to say this to you, that if there's a group of parents that you know that are clamoring for an online option, we are going to ask people's opinion on this. We want to know if you plan on using our buses. We want to know what type of online options you're looking at. Because, we want to open the school year for our kids, but if nobody wants to come back, that tells us a lot. But most of the feedback I've gotten is that, look, if you can do this safely, then we want our kids back in school. We know that safety and then preparing a robust education platform, if we have to close, is really important. So yeah, we plan on doing as much of the all the requirements and as much as the strongly recommended options on the governor's roadmap to opening as we can. But in the back of our heads, we're thinking that we could be in a closing situation. We want to be able to go back and forth and keep our kids in sync. And so to do that, we want to start and just gain this immediate capacity with our technology. We want to build the relationships as quickly as possible, so there's trust among teacher, parent, and student. And you can't do that by starting remotely. So that's why I'm if we're in phase 4, that's why I'm trying to put a plan together that brings us to in-person instruction as fast as possible. I have some questions on here about social emotional supports. Those are also parts of surveys that we'll be interacting with kids with immediately upon opening, but I won't go into details now because we're at the 1 hour mark, and that's about what I can do with Zoom capacity. So I'm getting ready to wrap up this meeting. I'm going to throw it out there one more time. If you have a very specific case that you need to discuss, you want to discuss, please email me. If I'll get the right people involved. If we have to talk about it in person or something like that, or through a Zoom call, we will. And do expect a list of frequently asked questions to come out, including some surveys, so you can give us more information on how you plan on using our transportation options and what type of online options might work best for you. Seeing no other comments, I'm going to leave the meeting. Thanks for your feedback. I'm looking forward to building a robust plan that our board will approve in August. So thanks. Appreciate it.